Hello, everybody, and welcome to Lesson 4, entitled The Battle of Our Lives. So, no, it's not COVID, it's not Kenny, it's not the liberals, it's not the conservatives, it's not even aliens. However, the battle of our lives is about reading strategies. Now, you may go, whoa, that's a little melodramatic, Colleen, but really, how we decide to teach our children how to read affects everything that they do in school and beyond. And hopefully by the end of today, I will have convinced you of that fact. So, choosing a reading strategy and a philosophy about that reading strategy has immense ramifications on a child's life, really. Okay, so basically, why should we care about reading and teaching reading? Basically, there is an unseen sanctuary within the Reading Act, and that is by Marianne Wolf. So many of our students, really even here at college, have lost time with books. And they've lost the time where they could escape, where they could live in someone else's shoes for a while and gain a different perspective. And I think we're really seeing the ramifications of that in our society right now with, in the past with Black Lives Matters, with rallies across the province on divisive topics. And so I think we've lost a little bit of that ability to really put ourselves in somebody else's shoes that reading allows us to do. Also, there's an identity shift away from seeing self as readers. So kids are identifying as reluctant or fake readers. They're identifying as readers who lack confidence in their own skills as a reader. And we need to really help them create a positive image where they proudly say that they are a reader. And finally, why do we need to care? We need to care because it's crucial. Remember 371, remember all the things that you learned there. Students need to understand that reading is a meaning-making process. And they must believe their own ability to make sense of the text, or else they just won't read. And we know what happens then. Okay, so I just want to take you over to those green stats. In 2016, 12th graders reported spending nearly 6 hours on digital media daily, so going online, texting, and using social media. At the same time, their interest in books fell to an all-time low. Okay, so they're doing lots of reading, but not book reading. And book reading, I think, is essential. Along with digital reading, kids need to still be reading books. And 16% of 12th grade students reported reading a book or magazine for pleasure daily in 2016, compared to 60% in 1976. So only 16% of our 12th grade kids are reading a book for pleasure daily, which is quite low. Okay, so let's look at also, the concept of reading to children is also crucial in their reading development. So this is a little bit of some interesting stats from Penny Kittle, one of my favorite authors, both on reading strategies, but also writing strategies. You're going to see a little bit more of her when we get into writing. So read aloud matters. More than half of kids age 0 to 5 are read aloud to. There we go. Sorry, I had a little typo there and couldn't quite figure out what was going on. Let's try that again. More than half of kids ages 0 to 5 are read aloud to 5 to 7 days a week, but that number dips to 1 in 3 among kids ages 6 to 8. It drops to 1 in 6 ages 9 to 11. But look at this stat. 40% of kids ages 6 to 11 say they wish their parents had continued to read to them, and more than 80% of kids ages 6 to 17 say they loved or liked a lot being read aloud to. So we read to babies, we read to our preschoolers, but then life gets busy. But it's super important, and kids are actually really still desiring to be read to. Okay, also, all of the experiences that we give our students live on into the future. So kids who enjoy reading outperform the abilities of their peers by a widening margin. So if kids are read to by age 10, they are like 1.3 years ahead of their colleagues who are not read to. By the age 12, they're 2.1 years ahead in reading ability, and by age 14, they're 3.3 years ahead if they read. Okay, and I'm just going to go over to the left here. Reading engagement is nothing short of miraculous. Engaged readers spend 500% more time reading than do their peers who aren't turned on by books, and all those extra hours inside books they love gives them a leg up in everything that leads to a happy, productive life. Deep conceptual understanding about a wide range of topics, expanded vocabulary, strategic reading ability, critical literary skills, and engagement with the world that's more likely to make them dynamic citizens drawn into full civic participation. Woohoo, right? Like, isn't that what we want for all of our kids? And that we can get that by encouraging our kids to continue to read books. Digital text absolutely is important in this day and age, but we can't put books aside just to do digital reading. Okay, here we go. What we're going to focus on today is the history of reading strategies. And you're probably like, whoa, this is going to be one of those snoozers. It's absolutely not. I think it's fascinating. And this is your life. This is what you are going to have to make big decisions on as a teacher. Okay, so here we go. Basically, when you look back in history, there are three main strategies that you will find. You have the phonics, which is the knowledge of the relationships between sounds and letters. It's the way children learn to read by sounding out words, and it goes way back. It was popularized actually in the 1800s with the McGuffey readers. So you'll see on the left-hand side there, those are some of the earliest readers that were proponents of teaching through phonics. Then we have the whole language that was popular. It first appeared in the 1930s, and it was popularized, there we go, through Dick and Jane books. Now, some of you may have actually read some of these, or you may have had them read to because your parents were nostalgic. But this was the whole language concept, was you would just see the words and understand how to read them just by looking at them in their entirety. These guys kind of fought it out a little bit. They kind of fought it out a little bit, but I'm going to give you a little bit more information on whole language first. One idea around whole language is that the reading is a very visual memory process. And the books rely on word repetition and pictures to support the meaning of the text. And the idea is that if you see the words enough, you basically eventually store them in your memory as visual images. So that's kind of the fundamental idea around whole language. The main point behind whole language is for children to understand and enjoy the text. Right? When kids understand and enjoy reading on the words on the page, for a whole language person, they will just pop out, right? Versus phonics, which could be seen as sort of arduous and monotonous and things like that. So that's a whole language specialist. Okay, so now what happened is these two were battling it out. It was called the reading wars, and you'll still hear that term, the reading wars. So because these two were battling it out, it gave a chance for sort of a middle ground. So if we think about whole language over here and phonics over here, it gave this chance for a middle ground to develop, which is basically balanced literacy. So reading researchers and teachers thought that maybe a new approach that took the best of phonics and the whole language would be the best. And balanced literacy is born. So I'm just going to give you a little history here on it. Ken Goodman in 1967 presented a paper at the American Educational Research Association conference in New York City. And as a total aside, I've actually spoken at that big conference. It's a great conference if you ever have a chance to go. Total aside. Okay, here we go. In Goodman's paper, 1967 paper, Goodman rejected the idea that reading is a precise process that involves exact or detailed perception of letters or words. Instead, he argued that as people read, they make predictions about the words on the page using these three cues. So these are the three cues that you see here in blue. Graphic cues, so basically what do the letters tell you about what the word might be? Syntactic cues, what kind of word could it be? For example, a noun or a verb. And semantic cues, what word would make sense here based on the context. So that's, you have the visual, the meaning of the word, and the structure of the word. Okay, so basically its modus operandi is to teach phonics and allow plenty of time for authentic reading and writing. Balanced literacy proponent would use predictable texts for beginning and struggling readers. They would assess students using this meaning, structure, and visual analysis on reading records. So I'm going to talk about a little bit later on about reading records. And they would explain reading as an orchestration of meaning, structure, and visual cues. So basically, everything was perfect until those rotten cognitive scientists came along with new research based on, or new data based on a lot of research. Okay, so Keith Stanovich was a cognitive scientist, and he worked at the University of Michigan in 1975. So he wanted to see for himself if Goodman's theories, so Goodman, the proponent of balanced literacy, if his theories were correct, that people read words through this graphic, syntactic, and meaning cues. Well, his conclusion was that Goodman was wrong. And this is a quote. To our surprise, all of our research results pointed in the opposite direction, Stanovich wrote. It was the poorer readers, not the more skilled readers, who were more reliant on context to facilitate word recognition. So he found, Stanovich found that skilled readers could actually instantly recognize words without relying on the context. And lots of other researchers have confirmed these findings with similar experiments since Stanovich's 1975 project. And it turns out that really the ability to read words in isolation quickly and accurately is the hallmark of actually being a skilled reader and not a beginning or a struggling reader. Okay, and really this is not new research. Cognitive scientists have been publishing this kind of information on how the brain works in reading for decades. So you may have heard this term, the science of reading. Basically, the science of reading, and I'm just going to read this quote here. The term science of reading refers to the research that reading experts, especially cognitive scientists, have conducted on how we learn to read. This body of knowledge, over 20 years in the making, has helped debunk older methods of reading instruction that were based on tradition and observation and not evidence. Okay, so when you hear that term science of reading, that's basically what it is. However, science of reading is also a proponent of thinking about students reading using these three strategies. So these are the main components of what's actually going on in the student's brain when learning to read. So phonics instruction. So they're saying that based on the science of reading, students need explicit instruction in the essential components of reading. So they need really clear components of reading on phonological awareness, on phonics, on fluency, on vocab, and reading comprehension, right? So you're starting to see those terms over and over again. The key differentiator between the science of reading approach and alternatives is phonics. So that's why it's number one on this slide. The phonics approach basically teaches children to begin reading by manipulating the sounds in the words or sounding out the words, probably how a lot of you were taught how to read, but maybe not. We're going to have this discussion when we come back to class. Their stance would be that teaching of phonics must be clear, detailed, and systematic. So kind of when you hear the term science of reading, phonics instruction is sort of what you might think of as encompassing everything that science of reading is about. However, they're also putting forward the concept of auditory processing when you're talking about what's actually going on and impacting children's ability to learn how to read. Is basically they're saying that you have to make sure, obviously, the auditory process is working. So if there are any hearing issues, that is going to absolutely impact how the brain is receiving this oral text, and then actually how the brain is navigating through the actual written text. So auditory processing there. Also, they're starting to include the concept of working memory as an important component of how students learn to read. So I'm going to just read this because it makes, I think it's very succinct and it makes sense. Working memory is different from simple memorization. When children memorize such things as sight words or just any words, as well as the sounds for letters and letter combinations without any connection to anything, they use one of the most primitive and, from an evolutionary perspective, oldest parts of the brain, which is the hippocampus. The hippocampus stores memories and acts like a file clerk accessing different brain regions to retrieve them. However, when children learn phonics, word recognition, and ultimately comprehension through memory strategies and systems, they exercise their working memory, which is a higher order skill. So if they're given memory strategies and systems versus just singular words, then they start working memory. Then involves the prefrontal cortex, which is later maturing, higher level region in the brain that involves executive functions, allowing children to develop memory strategies and systems. So they're saying they need overall strategies and systems, and not just these singular words where the brain can't hook these single words onto anything. They like a system or strategy. But you might say, but Colleen, didn't you just tell us the prefrontal cortex actually doesn't develop in 4, 5, and 6-year-olds? And so how can they be accessing that? Which is, I would say, well done, good and worthy student, because that is exactly what is happening in 4, 5, and 6-year-olds. That prefrontal cortex is not developed. However, the working memory can start to be intentionally developed at a young age, so that when that prefrontal cortex does start to develop, it already has the pathways and the synapses in the brain that then it will then, when the prefrontal cortex starts to develop, those synapses are strong and those pathways are developed, and so that will then work into the prefrontal cortex. So that is sort of the science. So when you hear the term, the science of reading, it's basically all the research that the cognitive scientists have done on what is actually happening in the brain around reading. And then these are some of the 3 big concepts. Phonics needs to be clear, hearing has to be good, and starting to train that prefrontal cortex so that when it does develop, it's good to go. Okay, so that's a lot of information. So for you, it seems to have come back full circle, right from the 1800s. It's like, okay, so those guys maybe were okay. So it's gone, phonics to whole language, to balanced literacy, now back to the cognitive scientists and phonics. So what is happening? What does this mean for you? So in a way, it's sort of confusing, but it's also really exciting for you because, again, you have the skills to dive into these programs and look at them with the critical eye, and you have to start making decisions about your philosophical concept about how to teach reading. Okay, so we're going to jump into a little bit so you have a few tangible things to hang your hat on. Okay, so here we go. This is how, kind of like when we looked at programs, how to analyze programs, this is how you want to think about analyzing reading strategies. So again, what is your philosophical basis? Do you believe that phonics or whole language or balanced literacy is the best reading strategy? And the next one, what is the research backing of the strategy that you're analyzing, right? So again, what is that research? And you are good researchers. You know what good research looks like and what bad research looks like, and where do you want to hang your hat? On which research do you want to hang your hat? And I think ultimately you need to decide a little bit of the reading strategy that you're going to use based on your actual students. So for example, if you're teaching grade 1 and they're all reading at a grade 3 level, yes, in the dream world, right? You have a grade 1 class, they're all reading at a grade 3 level. Maybe you don't have to pound the phonics in such an explicit and direct and intentional way because they're already there. So again, I think you really have to look at your students. If you have a pretty regular class of grade 1s where you have some kids that are reading at like a pre-K level, and then some kids that are reading at a grade 3 level, then you would maybe have a different view on the particular strategy. Okay, so with the mindset you probably should know something about all the reading strategies, let's jump into the main advocates, the big names of these particular strategies that are connected with some big programs. So that when you go to a party and Terry and Carolyn Freeman happen to be there, you can like wow them with your knowledge of these reading strategies. Okay, so then once we have a bit of an idea of the reading strategies, then we're going to have a look at what the cognitive scientists are saying about these reading strategies. Okay, so these are from your reading for this week, so these names should not be a surprise. So basically, the simple view of reading is Louisa Moats, and you probably have heard about her sort of groundbreaking article called "Reading is Rocket Science." And she is saying that reading is hard. Reading is really, sorry, someone's just driving on my sidewalk. Anyways, her idea is really more of a view on reading than a program. But she's advocating that reading and language arts instruction needs to be deliberate, systematic, and there must be explicit teaching of word recognition. And that we must instruct the majority of students with this direct, systematic, and explicit way, particularly when we are teaching decoding and how to decipher the print. Okay, so she's definitely on the phonics side. If you're looking at the pendulum, she's definitely on we need to teach kids decoding and phonics. And she is very much a proponent of teacher education programs, also teaching really solid phonics skills. Okay, we have then Marie Claire, who her system is called Reading Recovery, and she's a developmental psychologist from New Zealand. She first kind of laid out her theories about reading in her 1960s dissertation based on Goodman's theory, right? So she based her dissertation on Goodman's theory on whole language. She definitely holds a whole language philosophy where text is leveled and predictable. So look at my pants, look at my jacket, so that there's that repetition in there. Okay, so I'm going to go to now here. So basically this, if any of you have done running records that look like, I'm going to go back to this, look like this is what I'm talking about when we're doing the 3 cueing system. So basically this is a way to both teach and analyze reading. So basically you say, when a child is reading, does the word make sense? So does it make sense if you said the cat ate its food? No. Then you'd say, okay, that doesn't make sense. What should the word probably be? The cat ate the food. The structural code breaker, does it sound right? So if you said the running was white, having running in that spot, it just doesn't sound right to our ears. And then there's the visual code breaker. Does it look right? So we tromped through the woods. when maybe instead of tromped, it should have been traveled, but they read the first couple letters and then filled it in. So that would be a visual. So they're actually taking the visual of the word, like the TR, and then filling in the rest of the world. However, know that this idea of teaching children to read by asking, does it make sense, does it look right, and does it sound right, is being challenged by cognitive scientists, reading specialists, and teachers, as they're finding out more and more students are not learning to read to an adequate level in grade 3 using this system. So if any of you have ever had one of these done to you, or you have done them, this is definitely a whole language philosophy where the kids are learning. They're not being stressed to decode. They're being asked to simply memorize a lot of this text. So you can see here, so for example, they passed laws, bath, large-scale fishing. So the student probably used a visual, and then they went back and self-corrected and changed because the meaning was weird, the structure was weird of a sentence, and then visually they used it. So that's what the 3 cueing system means in there. Okay, there's also a pretty big proponent of whole language is Regie Routman. She discusses the misinterpretation of teaching reading with the whole language approach. She is definitely a proponent of it. She doesn't promote phonics instruction in the context of real and predictable literature. She wants kids to read based on a literature-based program. So her big thing is they need to love reading and writing. And when we pick it apart and decode, teach decoding and phonics over and over and over again, the kids hate it. That's her view. So she's very much about wanting joy and joy in reading and writing. Okay, she is not on your reading list, but I added her in because she is a pretty big proponent. And if you're interested, I just put her homepage there, and it'll give you a bit better of a sense of who she is and what she's doing. Okay, so sorry, back to Marie Claire. To be fair, her program did start as a program to only work with struggling readers. Or those who were behind a grade level, but it kind of morphed into a reading program for all levels. It kind of got out of control, and her ultimate goal is she wants kids to have amazing comprehension, which we all do. So that's but the way that she's wants to get there is through whole language. Okay. Now we're going to jump into some big kahunas in the balanced literacy place. So similar to reading recovery, sort of a program, but has much more of a balanced literacy approach. So this is Irene Fountas and Fountas Pinnell, and they do encourage phonics and phonemic awareness. These are the two that set up the leveled reading text. So if you've ever been in Crestwood School, you see in the library, I shouldn't say now, I haven't been in Crestwood for a couple of years, but I know when I went in there, their library was all set up in like level A, level B, level C, level D. That's based on Fountas and Pinnell's leveled reading, which I'll go to talk a little bit later about the whole concept of leveled reading. Okay, they are a big proponent of the 3 cueing system and running records. Oh, there's my dog. Hang on. All right, dog is under control. John is home in the house, and we're going to continue on with Fountas and Pinnell. So these two are big proponents of the 3 cueing systems, and they are big proponents of running records. So if you use any of their sources, that will be the basis for teaching and assessment. And their resources are definitely in schools. They're very popular because it's a very thorough resource, and it has everything you need to teach, even the script of what you want to say So look at the results, 346,000 just to say Fountas Pinnell Elementary Reading Program in there. Okay. We also have Richard Allington, and again, his focus is on struggling readers and how struggling readers need a plethora of tools taught to them in order to survive. He's definitely a proponent of balanced literacy. He kind of rails against straight up phonics instruction. He was part of the Reading First, the George W. Bush initiative during the No Child Left Behind era. And he's really focused on all of the key areas of instruction. So phonemic awareness, phonics, vocab, fluency, comprehension. Okay, so that is Richard Allington in there. We also have Lucy Culkins, who is focused on units of study in reading. Again, she would be a balanced literacy person. She uses the 3Q system for teaching and assessing reading. Systematic phonics is not a central part of the program, and it's pretty lean in her resources. So if you are a phonics person, the units of study you would find does not have a lot of phonics, and she really wants this sense of immersion into literature, again, for that joy of jumping into the literature. Okay, let's have a look at now at the main battle arguments that cognitive scientists have been putting forth for decades that focusing on teaching our children using the whole language and the balanced literacy strategies is actually really detrimental to them learning how to read. So let's jump into that. So why is focusing on teaching reading with 3Qing a system detrimental? Okay, so I'm going to read you some stories so you can sit back and relax for a minute. I'm going to read you Molly and Margaret's story with a bit of a caveat here. So several of these interventions and curricula operate under, they're talking about balanced literacy and whole language here. Several of these interventions and curricula operate under the understanding that students use multiple sources of information or cues to solve words. These can include the letters on the page, the context in which the page appears, pictures, or the grammatical structure of the sentence. But neuroscience studies also suggest that skilled readers don't read this way. Skilled readers process all of the letters in words when they read them, and that they read connected text very quickly. They do not try to memorize the words, skip words, or use the context to guess words. They decode the words. Skilled readers use orthographic mapping. They pay attention to the details of a written word. So with practice, it gets mapped that sounds in P-O-N-Y are written as pony. Weak word recognition skills is the most debilitating source of a reading problem. Okay, so observational studies show that poor readers, so these are poor readers, they do use different sources of information to predict what words might say. They will opt for other ways to try to figure out words because phonics is too challenging. The cueing system seems easier at the beginning, but when they get to third grade, those cues don't work anymore. And this also sends a message to kids that they do not have to sound out the words. So the cognitive scientists are saying that using a 3Qing system is actually really detrimental because it's not how skilled readers learn. They're actually skills that poorer readers use. Okay, so here's a story about Molly. Molly Woodworth was a kid who seemed to do well at everything, good grades in the gifted and talented program, but she couldn't read very well. There was no rhyme or reason to reading for me, she said. When a teacher would dictate a word and say, "Tell me how you think I can spell it," I sat there with my mouth open while other kids gave spellings, and I thought, how do they even know where to begin? I was totally lost. Woodworth went to public school in Owasso, Michigan in the 1990s. She says sounds and letters just didn't make sense to her, and she doesn't remember anyone teaching her how to read. So she came up with her own strategies to get through text. Strategy number 1 was to memorize as many words as possible. Words were like pictures to me, she said. I had a really good memory. Strategy number 2, guess the words based on context. Is this sounding familiar? If she came across a word she didn't have in her visual memory bank, she'd look at the first letter and come up with the word that seemed to make sense. Reading was a kind of game of 20 questions. What word could this be? Strategy 3, if all else failed, she'd skip the word she didn't know. Most of the time, she could get the gist of what she was reading, but getting through text took forever. I hated reading because it was taxing, she said. I'd get through a chapter and my brain hurt by the end of it. I wasn't excited to learn. No one knew how much she struggled, not even her parents. Her reading strategies were her, what she called, dirty little secrets. Woodworth, who now works in accounting, says she's still not a very good reader and tears up when she talks about it. Reading influences every aspect of your life, she said. She's determined to make sure her own kids get off to a better start than she did. That's why she was so alarmed to see how her oldest child, Claire, was being taught to read in school. A couple of years ago, Woodworth was volunteering in Claire's kindergarten classroom. The class was reading a book together, and the teacher was telling the children to practice the strategies that good readers use. The teacher said, "If you don't know the word, just look at the picture up here," Woodworth recalled. There was a fox and a bear in the picture, and the word was bear, and she said, "Look at the first letter. It's a B. Is it a fox or a bear?" Woodworth was stunned. I thought, oh my goodness, those are my strategies. Those are the things I taught myself to look like a good reader, not the things that good readers do. She said, "These kids are being taught my dirty little secrets." She went to the teacher and expressed her concerns. The teacher told her she was teaching reading the way the curriculum told her to. And let's listen to Margaret's story. Margaret Goldberg, a teacher and literacy coach in the Oakland Unified School District, remembers a moment when she realized what a problem the 3Qing approach was. She was with a first grader named Rodney when he came to a page with a picture of a girl licking an ice cream cone and a dog eating a bone. The text said, "My little dog likes to eat with me." But Rodney said, "My dog likes to eat the bone." Rodney breezed right through it, unaware that he hadn't read the sentence on the page. Goldberg realized lots of her students couldn't actually read the words in their books. Instead, they were memorizing sentence patterns and using the pictures to guess. One little boy exclaimed, "I can read this book with my eyes shut." Oh no, Goldberg thought. That is not reading. Okay, so that's Molly and Margaret's experience with the 3Qing system. Okay, here we go. Let's look at the balanced literacy. Now, let's look at balanced literacy. The balanced literacy proponents will tell you that their approach is a mix of phonics instruction with plenty of time for kids to read and enjoy books. But if you look carefully at the materials, you see that that's actually not really happening in balanced literacy. What's happening, it's mixing a bunch of different ideas about how kids learn to read. So it's a little bit of whole word instruction with long lists of words for kids to memorize. It's a little bit of phonics, and fundamentally it's the idea that children should be taught to read using the 3Qing system. So the 3Qing system is alive and well in balanced literacy. And it turns out cueing may actually prevent kids from focusing on words the way in which they should in order to become skilled readers. It actually encourages them to look away from the letters. So some stats on the side here. In the US, in 2019, according to Education Week, 75% of teachers are using the 3Qing approach. 65% of the teachers said that their district selected their primary reading programs and materials, while 27% said the decision was up to their school. So 75% of teachers are using the 3Qing system, with 65% of teachers being given a reading program, and the teachers are not actually analyzing the program. They are just simply receiving the program. Okay, so these are issues. These are issues that the systems that the teachers are using are being handed down to them without them actually being able to have a say into which system they want to use. Okay, so let's look at these three systems that are super popular. So Fountas and Pinnell, here we go. Reading recovery and the Lucy Calkins units of reading, which are basically whole language and balanced literacy systems They are definitely in schools, and they're very popular, again, because they're very thorough and it has everything that you need to teach. However, let's look at the number of hits. So 346,000, 661,000, 467 million results for this. So these are popular. These are very popular systems. Okay, so there's also a lot of money behind this, which is why I put Heinemann in the publishing company in the middle of this. So for example, in 2018, just in Oakland, the schools bought $500 million worth of Fountas Pinnell and Lucy Culkin materials. And when Education Week asked for an interview with Heinemann, which is the publishers of these two resources, the journalist was declined and a statement was sent that said, every product the company sells is informed by extensive research. Okay, but when you look at the research, again, specifically for Fountas and Pinnell, some of you found this when you looked at this resource, was that the key research projects were actually from Heinemann. So the actual publication is putting out the research, which you as researchers know that's not great research in there. How convenient. The reading recovery has a bit stronger evidence base, but controversy has been noted that a certain low achieving population was excluded from some of the major research studies, which ultimately skewed those results. So, super fun for you. This is yours to decide. These are the questions that you as a teacher have to decide upon. There is no perfect box set. You are the most important part of a child learning to read. So you need to take up this battle. You need to know what's going on. You need to know what you're teaching and why you're teaching it. Okay? You must be smart researchers and challenge new programs when they're handed to you, and you need to continue to train to do high quality PD and read yourself about new research findings. Remember, this is all the inside of the house. All the inside of the house. Hopefully what this has given you is a bit of the critical analysis, the roof, and some of the foundation, but now you need to do that work to fill up the house. So again, you are the most important part of a child learning to read. What we're going to do in class is we're going to party talk these views on reading strategies. So I need you to do those readings that are on your reading list and be ready to talk in your groups, in groups from the point of view of, I want you to be Marie or Regie, I want you to be Louisa, I want you to be one of either Fountas or Pinnell, I want you to be Richard, I want you to be Lucy, right? And I want you to be able to talk through your particular strategy and maybe argue a bit about these particular strategies, because this is what you're going to have to do as a teacher in your classroom, with your principal, with your district, is you're going to have to push and really make those decisions based on what you believe is the best practice for teaching reading. Awesome. Take care.